A lot to break down today as inflation and PPI numbers come in this week. We'll get a read on CPI coming up in the next couple of days. This may have an implication on how the crypto markets take form. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into TechPath. We'll be breaking all this down for you guys. Take a look at where the markets could be leaning to. And there's a couple other things I think that will flow into what tokens, etc., might be on the move. And there's a few that, of course, many will be talking about. So I want to thank our sponsor today, and that is Coinbase. If you're brand new to crypto and you want to get started, Coinbase is the best place for you to get going. And if you've been in crypto for a long time and you just want a new place to trade on, check out Coinbase.com. You, of course, can sign up over there, get a little bit of a bonus by just using our link. Future of Money is here. Most trusted place for both businesses and people to buy and sell. So check it out. Use our link down below. Let's take a look at the markets right now. Market cap holding at about 2.1 trillion. And of course, volume right now holding at around 69 billion over the 24. Dominance, Bitcoin holding a 56.3. And of course, Ethereum a 15.2. I was looking at some of the movers on the 7-day. And if you look at this, of course, we've talked about Helium on the move, a handful of others that we've had here on the show. There's Injective Protocol, Stacks, of course, Near Protocol, also Arbitrum Phantom. Interesting that we've got a couple of movements there. Point being is that the market is seeing some upside over this last 7 days. Bitcoin, of course, now above 60K as we're recording this today. I want to get into a few points that could be leaning into where the markets are going. PPI numbers came in a little soft, which is good. This, of course, inflation falls to 2.2. This is below the expectations of what was 2.3. Let me zoom in on that for you guys. Core PPI falls to 2.4, below expectations of 2.7. So that's another one that is down below what the expectations were. Another constructive sign. And it also could mean that, this also setting up Chair Powell for a September rate cut. There are people, though, that do not necessarily believe that. And that, of course, is none of them Mr. Peter Schiff. We got to get Peter back on the show. Cooler than expected headline, PPI print, no way indicates if inflation is heading back down. He still thinks we're up above this. Fed's 2% target, probably unreachable in his opinion, is looking for excuses to cut rates in September. This is a superficial beat, but it will qualify now. They just need another BCS CPI report tomorrow, which is most likely going to happen. We could see some soft numbers come in tomorrow, which would be good for CPI, meaning that the Fed is achieving their goals of lowering inflation. Now, the question is have they pressed too hard and pushed too many companies, businesses, homeowners, and consumers into a place that they cannot return from, because jobless claims will be the big one. July CPI inflation expectations, everybody kind of floating around that 2.9, which will be the first time we've really seen a solid number under 3% if it does hit it. My anticipation is it might come in a little softer than that, meaning we've seen prices slowing over the last 60 days. This may be something that actually shows up. If it's a larger than, or I should say, more of a cut from 2.9, maybe at a 2.8 or a 2.7, that I think will have implications on a lot of the markets, including the traditional S&P. Taking a quick peek in on Truflation, also sliding down over the last week, down under 1.5, or right at right now. This, of course, is compared to the government rate at 3%. So think about that. Of course, many people, as I said, think that we've kind of already achieved the market position as to where we've been trying to get to, which is that 2% target that Chair Powell tries to hit on a lot. All of this, as I said, could set up Bitcoin for a good position, but perfect macro setup, but a dip below 58 risk about 500 million in liquidation. So that might just be too juicy for traders. So over the past decade, Bitcoin has had a tendency to go through these several months before the bottom, especially around global M2, money supply, and then it rips, so way ahead of the move in liquidity, and has a mid-cycle correction. That's the thing we're kind of playing into right now. Other things that you have to kind of consider, despite the bullish macroeconomic perspective, Bitcoin price could still see a correction around the 55K mark. So very interesting. I still think that we may see an upside here, and my upside is really depending on what happens with CPI. And again, that gets back to that whole point. If Chair Powell feels as though we've softened enough, can they start to scoop into that soft landing, which would be timing it right. I still think that's not necessarily possible, but those are things that are made for conversation. I want to go into a clip here talking about where would Bitcoin be without the ETFs. Take a look.
I'll say this, I'm not sure. You probably have users who would disagree. I think if you take the ETFs out of the picture, the price of Bitcoin is like 20 grand because it was 30 when BlackRock filed. It started to go up because, oh, BlackRock's coming in. Then they launched. There was little sell the news, but it hung tough. Now it went up a lot because of the flows. You unwind all that, you're at 30K, but you still have Mt. Gox and some of these other in Germany, and who's there to buy it? So I think the ETFs should be seen as nothing short of a godsend, to be honest with you.
Well, first of all, I like and respect Eric, but again, he's the ETF analyst at Bloomberg, so that would be obvious. I would take the other position. It may not be at the 70K mark that we've seen come in, but it definitely may not have seen the volatility either because we're playing in a bigger sandbox now with a lot more active trades. And I think that might be the bigger position, which of course, as we have seen with especially offloading of Germany and Mt. Gox, I agree with that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we'd be seeing a 20K Bitcoin at this juncture in the cycle, which I don't think would have been the case. I think we're right about where we need to be. It could have been in the mid 40s, but hey, that's double what he's talking about there. So a couple of points that you have to kind of compare. Other things that are interesting, didn't realize US ETFs are on track to pass Satoshi in Bitcoin being held. So as you can kind of see, there's the list. And Binance holding in the pole position right now to 550,000 Bitcoins. And BlackRock coming in very strong. So this could actually hit, what did he say, by late next year? So October, November of next year, we could see BlackRock holding more Bitcoin than Satoshi Nakamoto. That would be a very interesting time for Bitcoin. Here we go. Let's take a look at Ethereum ETF inflows. Grayscale ETH ends 14-day outflow streak. So we were seeing a little bit of positive move here now on ETH inflows. So that's a good thing. And again, this may see what we've had a chance to see with Ethereum, which of course it spiked up around 2,700. And I don't know if you guys are looking at Ethereum. I mean, ready? All right. So I don't know if you're looking at Ethereum, is it finally in a position where it can start to accelerate? Because this was an interesting move in comparison to Bitcoin. I want to also talk about the ETF possibility because this could open up not only ETH, but also Bitcoin in terms of wirehouses. Let me go to this clip.
It's not just that these ETFs are out there, it's that there's BlackRock and Fidelity. Because a company like Morgan Stanley, if there were just small issuers involved, I'm not sure they would onboard them or definitely not as quick. But BlackRock and Fidelity's brand name you cannot overstate how much cover this gives people. They use ETFs from these firms in their other portfolios or for their other investments. So there's a trust there that doesn't exist with pure Bitcoin, but BlackRock brings an enormous amount of trust and cover for, these are like 50 to 70-year-old people managing funds. They go golfing. They have nothing to do with the trust BlackRock. So BlackRock and the ETFs to me are a bridge between those two worlds.
So that point right there that Eric's making, I would agree with. I think that it does give, especially around fund managers that are out there trying to talk to, high net worth individuals. And remember, it's the exposure too. This is not exposure that's going to be deep into what you might see in tech stocks or energy, et cetera, even utilities. I think the exposure is low enough. You got cover. Yeah, you're going to see a lot more fund managers start to go in this direction. He goes further into another clip here where he talks about the SEC going after Morgan Stanley for offering these ETFs. Take a look.
He wrote that Morgan Stanley has now voluntarily subjected themselves to what will likely become the largest SEC and FINRA examination sweep in history. This is, of course, because of the news that you and I just discussed. What do you think of that? Do you think that it's going to scare away others?
No, something about this just pisses him off. There's people who are agnostic. Like, I don't see the point, but whatever. But then there's just people who just they can't live with this. Like they are the inverse to some people who are so hardcore they can't live without it. And this guy seems like one of those guys. And I got to write off a lot of it as just hurt feelings and bias. He didn't want the ETFs to get approved. So he's been taking L after L. He didn't want the flows to come in. He didn't want there to be demand. He didn't want, people to be happy. And like L, 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 L. So, if you're like 0 and 8, you're going to get a little cranky.
Yeah, hey, listen, he is no doubt about that. You can see that in football teams that are 0 and 8. But hey, I agree in the sense that when you're in a position of power, especially the SEC, and you continue to see the market speaking differently, it mainly puts you on the opposite side of capitalism. And this being a capitalist country, it kind of makes you look a little bit silly. So I'm in agreement with what Eric's talking about there. He's talking about John Reese Stark, who is the SEC guy who was kind of championing this whole idea around what's going on when it comes to traditional trading houses starting to make this accessible much more, especially around the ETFs, both Ethereum and on Bitcoin. So two big things. I want to move over to a little bit of the political landscape because this is a very critical time in both candidacies for the president. Ryan Adams came in. He says, as right now, there's 1 to 2% of Democrats who may vote Trump because of Biden's admin's late situation with Elizabeth Warren and their run on the crypto policy. So yes, Gary may lose the Democrats for the White House. We've said this, quite a bit. And the other thing that he mentions here is the radio silence from, the Harris camp. And this is something that we talked about with a couple of recent interviews, is that I just don't understand why we haven't seen a position from the Democrats. Now I understand they're playing cat and mouse between the two campaigns right now, and crypto is a critical one. I think much more critical than a lot of people really understand. So it is something that I think will continue to play into the fall as we go into November. Other things that look at this, and this is something that I'm kind of concerned with, is the SEC continuing its move on Uniswap. And of course, this is now going at venture capital funds, this A16Z, which is, of course, their involvement in what's happening over at Uniswap. So it's now setting its sight on several venture capital funds, including Andreessen and Union Square. So, I mean, those are some of the biggest guys in Silicon Valley. Pretty big deal. But they received letters from the SEC concerning their investments in Uniswap Labs. So I think Uniswap represents something that, the traditional banks and also traditional institutions have to get a grips with, and that is what DeFi truly represents to not only Americans, but to average individuals. That's the big breaker here that I think has really got them in an uproar. Right here, still can't believe the SEC is so committed to going after Uniswap, one of the most honest crypto companies. At the same time, people are launching scam coins all over, and we've seen this, over and over, this coming from the guys over on X. And right here, Uniswap's cumulative front-end revenue now surpassing 50 million. So you can clearly see there's a demand for this, and I think we're going to continue to see this. And decentralized finance is definitely not going away, much like what we may see with others. BlackRock also might launch a native L2 compatible with Ethereum. A couple of points within this: investment giant will retain a higher level of control in the case of hacks and exploits. That is the most important, I think, to BlackRock, because remember, they're putting a huge brand that they've built over decades on the line, not necessarily completely, because all fund managers and asset managers have losses and make bad calls. That's part of the market, but you definitely don't want to get one that's kind of an egg on your face. So I understand that. Trump-Musk interview avoided crypto quite a bit. This again goes back to my whole point of why we have not seen more initiatives from the Harris camp. Now, the Trump camp has laid out some, but I'm still cautious on what Trump will really do for crypto. I know everybody probably watching our show are saying it's the only way that we're going to get crypto anything is getting a new White House administration, and that the Harris campaign is just an extension of what we already have. I get that argument, but I think you have to be open enough, but also skeptical enough by both sides. And you have to put the pressure on. You got to put the pressure on Trump. You got to put the pressure on Harris. And I don't think Elon did a good job with that last night. And again, it wasn't his idea to go in and talk about crypto anyway, because I don't know that Elon's completely in on crypto, but it's something to watch. But he did open up the space to the Harris camp. So come on in. Do you think she'll take the invite? I don't think so, but I don't know. That would be an interesting. That might actually be more viewed than listened to than. Which, by the way, did any of you guys listen to that? Drop in the comments down below, because they had problems in the beginning. It was a terrible production, which is a typical thing. I put out a couple of tweets. Elon says there was DDoS on their servers, which consumed it all. They did end up concurrently around 1.4 to 1.5 million concurrent users for the live stream. That was pretty impressive considering their total numbers were in excess of 6 to 7 million. So not a bad deal for an audio space that had no interactivity and a very limited structured audience, which is on X. Other things you got to look at is, kind of things that are happening right now is, why not get more of the crypto narrative out there when things like this are being talked about, which is the issue of no taxes on tips. And we've been running numbers on this, and this is kind of an argument in the crypto pit, our research team, about this, because you look at what's happening on taxes for tips. Yes, the restaurant industry is probably one of the largest out there. There's only around, I say only, there's 15 million people employed in the restaurant industry. About 30% of those are line workers that can receive tips. That includes servers, back of house, all that. So that's a good number, but it's still only about 3 to 4 million people. That's not a huge number when you think about it, in comparison to the 90 plus million that are expected to own crypto in the United States. So that is an interesting point of going, now maybe this is low-hanging fruit and it's easy. It's good headlines. That's the angle. But I think the big one for both Harris and Trump would be to get in and see the numbers here. We were looking at Uber drivers, and it looks like there's about 7 million Uber drivers. This could be affected. But even if you had all of those and all of food service, which are the big ones, and then another 4 or 5 industries beyond that, hospitality, salons, etc., maybe you get to 15 million people, maybe 20 million at most. And when you look at the numbers right here on crypto holders in 2024, this is an adoption and sentiment report recently done, up from 30% to 40%, estimating around 93 million people now having access to crypto. So you're affecting people's wallets the same way, just because of the situation that we're dealing with here in the United States. So definitely one to keep going, guys, for all that. Bitcoin, of course, on the move right now. I'll go to the chart real quick and take a look as we get into Bitcoin, sliding up slightly on the day, but sentiment metrics on that little bar right there, you'll see all those red dots. Those are trending down right now, so it's likely that we'll see Bitcoin start to retrace in a little bit from 60K. I'm kind of curious what Solana is doing right now, and also ETH, which was up quite a bit on the day, but has started to retrace right now. This is on the daily. If you go to the 4-hour, you'll probably see a little different look on Ethereum as we, a little bit more positive on Ethereum. This may be a trade that will be a little bit long here. It looks like it's waking up to around 2,700, but I think we may see, if we go to the daily, what do we have there on daily? Okay, so yeah, a little bit on the overall average, still lagging. Now that could pick up later in the day. We'll see how this trades out for Ethereum. But the market could be also setting up for this CPI number, which could come in a little bit softer, and I think that could coil up a nice little recovery. We'll see. If you guys are not in the Diamond Circle, make sure and get in right now. It's a great place to get additional content from us. Make sure and follow me out there on X, @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.